In a small, quiet town surrounded by rolling green hills and winding country roads, life moved at its own unhurried pace. The kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, where front porches were alive with the sound of laughter or the creak of rocking chairs, and where the air carried the faint scent of freshly cut grass, mixed with the aroma of home-cooked meals wafting from nearby kitchens. Nestled right in the heart of this picturesque town was Joe's Diner, a cozy little eatery that had been serving locals for over 3 decades. Its red and white checkered floor, vinyl booths, and jukebox playing oldies made it feel like stepping back in time. Sarah Thompson was one of the diner's most beloved waitresses. With her warm smile, quick wit, and knack for remembering regular customers' orders, she had become something of a fixture there. She wasn't just good at her job. She genuinely cared about people. Whether it was refilling coffee cups for weary truckers who stopped on their long hauls or chatting with families about their weekends, Sarah always went out of her way to make everyone feel welcome. To many, she wasn't just a waitress, she was part of the fabric of the community. On this particular afternoon, the diner hummed with its usual energy. Truck drivers chatted over plates of greasy fries and burgers. Kids giggled as they spun around in the swivel stools at the counter, and bikers clad in leather jackets leaned against the walls outside, taking breaks from their rides. Inside, an elderly man named Harold Grizz McGraw sat quietly in a corner booth. Grizz, as he was affectionately called by those who knew him, was a staple among the biker crowd. He wore a weathered leather vest covered in patches that told stories of countless road trips, rallies, and adventures spanning decades. His gruff appearance might have intimidated some, but those who took the time to know him quickly realized he had a heart of gold. Today, however, Grizz seemed unusually pensive. He sipped his black coffee slowly, staring out the window as if lost in thought. Outside, his gleaming Harley-Davidson motorcycle stood proudly in the parking lot, a testament to years of care and dedication. It wasn't just a mode of transportation. For Grizz, it was a symbol of freedom, memories, and the open road. But what neither Grizz nor anyone else inside the diner could see was the group of teenagers loitering near the edge of the lot. They were loud, rowdy, and clearly up to no good. These teens weren't exactly strangers to the area. Known for skipping school and causing trouble, they often roamed the streets looking for ways to entertain themselves. Today, their attention had turned to Grizz's bike. At first, they simply pointed and laughed, making snide comments about how old-fashioned it looked compared to modern sports bikes. One of them kicked the tires playfully, earning approving hoots from the others. But things escalated quickly when another teen pulled out a set of keys and began scratching the pristine chrome finish. The sound of metal scraping against metal sent shivers down anyone's spine, but these kids didn't care. To them, it was all fun and games. Grizz eventually noticed the commotion outside. Setting his mug down carefully, he stepped out into the bright sunlight, squinting as his eyes adjusted. His deep voice boomed across the parking lot. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" The teens froze for a moment, startled by his sudden appearance. Then, realizing they outnumbered him, they started laughing again. One of them, emboldened by the group's bravado, shoved Grizz lightly on the shoulder. "What's it to you, Grandpa?" he sneered, his tone dripping with mockery. For a man in his late 60s, Grizz still carried himself with dignity and strength. But physically confronting 5 teenagers half his age wasn't an option. Instead, he tried reasoning with them, appealing to whatever shred of decency they might have left. "This bike means more to me than you'll ever understand," he said calmly, though his clenched fists betrayed his frustration. "If you've got a problem, take it up with me, not my ride." The teens, however, weren't interested in listening. Their taunts grew louder, and one of them even threatened to knock the bike over entirely unless Grizz left them alone. Just as the situation seemed poised to spiral further out of control, Sarah happened to glance out the diner window. What she saw made her blood run cold. There was Grizz, standing alone against a pack of disrespectful kids who clearly had no regard for personal property or basic human decency. Without giving herself time to second-guess her decision, Sarah untied her apron, tossed it onto the counter, and marched outside. Her footsteps echoed on the pavement as she approached the group, her jaw set with determination. When she reached them, she planted herself firmly between Grizz and the teens, her hands resting on her hips. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut through the chaos. The teens turned to face her, their smirks faltering slightly at the sight of this unexpected interruption. "Mind your own business, lady," one of them snapped, clearly annoyed by her presence. But Sarah wasn't about to back down. "Oh, I'm minding it all right," she shot back, her tone unwavering. "And right now my business is telling you that picking on someone twice your age isn't cool, not even a little bit." Her words hung in the air, silencing the group momentarily. For a brief second, it seemed like they might actually listen. But then, one of the teens stepped forward, pointing a finger at her. "You better watch yourself," he warned, his voice laced with false confidence. Sarah didn't flinch. Instead, she met his gaze head-on, refusing to let fear dictate her actions. "No, you better watch yourselves," she countered. "Because if I catch any of you messing with this man or his bike again, you'll have to answer to me. And trust me, you don't want that." The standoff lasted only a few more minutes before the teens finally relented, muttering insults under their breath as they slunk away. Grizz exhaled deeply, visibly shaken, but immensely grateful. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice trembling with emotion. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." Sarah gave him a reassuring smile. "Don't mention it," she replied. "Nobody deserves to be treated like that." Back inside the diner, patrons erupted into applause, cheering for Sarah's bravery. Some even stood up to give her a standing ovation. But while the immediate danger had passed, none of them, including Sarah, could have predicted the ripple effect her actions would soon create. Little did they know, this seemingly ordinary day was about to transform into something extraordinary, setting off a chain of events that would leave the entire town talking for years to come. As the applause inside Joe's diner slowly died down, Sarah returned to her duties with a mix of emotions swirling in her chest. On one hand, she felt proud of herself for standing up to the bullies and protecting Grizz. She knew deep down that it was the right thing to do. After all, no one deserved to be treated like that, especially not someone as kind-hearted as Grizz. But on the other hand, a nagging worry began creeping into her mind. What if those teenagers came back? What if their parents complained about her interference? And what would Joe think when he heard about what had happened? Sarah tried to push these thoughts aside as she refilled coffee cups and delivered plates of food to hungry customers. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The tension outside had been palpable, and while the immediate threat was gone, she suspected this wasn't the end of the story. Her instincts proved correct later that evening when Joe called her into his office. The office was small and cramped, with stacks of paperwork piled haphazardly, on a desk that looked like it hadn't seen a good cleaning in years. Joe sat behind it, his face etched with lines of stress and discomfort. He gestured for Sarah to take a seat across from him, but before she could even sit down, he started speaking. His voice was low and hesitant, almost apologetic. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, avoiding eye contact as he fiddled with a pen in his hands. Sarah's stomach sank. She already knew where this conversation was headed. "Is this about what happened earlier?" she asked, her tone calm despite the unease bubbling inside her. Joe nodded reluctantly. Yeah, it is," he admitted. "One of those kids' parents owns Carlson's Auto Repair, you know, the big shop on Main Street. They called me about an hour ago, saying you were aggressive toward their son and demanding I let you go." Sarah's heart sank further. Carlson's Auto Repair was one of the largest businesses in town, and its owner, Mr. Carlson, had significant influence over the local economy. Losing his patronage could mean disaster for Joe's already struggling diner. Sarah understood the pressure Joe was under, but that didn't make the situation any easier to swallow. "Joe, I didn't do anything wrong," she insisted, leaning forward slightly. "Those kids were vandalizing Grizz's bike and threatening him. I just stepped in to stop them." Joe sighed heavily, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I believe you, Sarah. Honestly, I do. You're one of my best employees, and I know you wouldn't pick a fight unless it was necessary. But business is tough enough as it is, and I can't afford to lose customers because of something like this." He paused, his eyes finally meeting hers. There was genuine regret in his gaze. "I'm sorry, but I have to let you go." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the gut. She opened her mouth to protest, but no sound came out. Instead, tears welled up in her eyes as the reality of the situation sank in. Being fired wasn't just inconvenient. It was devastating. Sarah was a single mother raising a young daughter. Emma and every paycheck mattered. Without her job at the diner, she didn't know how she'd pay rent or put food on the table. For a moment, she considered begging Joe to reconsider, but she quickly realized it wouldn't change anything. This decision wasn't personal. It was purely financial. When Sarah emerged from the office, her face red and streaked with tears, the mood in the diner shifted instantly. Several customers who had witnessed the earlier confrontation immediately picked up on her distress. One elderly woman approached her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "What happened, dear?" she asked gently. Sarah hesitated, unsure if she wanted to share the details, but eventually, she explained everything. Word spread quickly among the patrons, and soon murmurs of outrage filled the room. Grizz, who had stayed to finish his coffee, listened intently as the story unfolded. His jaw tightened with anger, not just at the injustice of Sarah losing her job, but also at the cowardice of the teen's parents for retaliating instead of addressing their children's behavior. When Sarah finally sat down at an empty booth, visibly shaken, Grizz joined her. "This isn't fair," he growled, his voice low but intense. "You stood up for me, and now you're paying the price for it. That's not how things are supposed to work." Sarah managed a weak smile, though her eyes still glistened with unshed tears. "It's okay, Grizz," she said softly. "I did what I thought was right, and I don't regret it. Sometimes doing the right thing comes with consequences, I guess." Her words were brave, but there was a sadness behind them that broke Grizz's heart. He vowed silently to himself that he wouldn't let this stand. Someone needed to fight for Sarah just like she had fought for him. Later that night, after the diner closed and Sarah returned home, Grizz got to work. He pulled out his phone and began making calls to fellow bikers in his network. Over the years, he had built strong connections with riders from all over the region, many of whom shared his values of loyalty, respect, and justice. He recounted Sarah's story to each person he spoke with, emphasizing not only her courage but also the unfairness of her being punished for doing the right thing. By the time he hung up for the last time, plans were already in motion. News of Sarah's firing spread like wildfire through online biker forums and messaging apps. Riders from neighboring towns and states pledged to show their support by riding into town en masse. Some promised to bring friends, while others coordinated logistics to ensure everyone arrived safely. Social media posts urging people to attend went viral, drawing attention not just locally but across the country. Within hours, the plan was set. Hundreds of bikers would descend upon the small town to send a clear message that standing up for what's right should never come with punishment. Meanwhile, Sarah spent the evening trying to process everything that had happened. After tucking Emma into bed, she sat alone in her dimly lit living room, staring blankly at the wall. Her mind raced with questions. How would she explain to her daughter why Mommy didn't have a job anymore? Would she be able to find another position quickly enough to keep them afloat? And most importantly, had she made a mistake by intervening earlier that day? As much as she tried to convince herself otherwise, doubt crept in. Maybe she should have ignored the commotion outside and left Grizz to handle it himself. Maybe stepping in had been too risky, too impulsive. But then she remembered the look on Grizz's face when she confronted the teens, the relief, the gratitude, the raw humanity. In that moment, she hadn't acted out of anger or recklessness. She had acted out of compassion. And as hard as things might get in the days ahead, she knew she couldn't trade that feeling for anything. Little did Sarah know, her act of kindness was about to spark something far greater than she could have ever imagined. While she sat alone in her quiet home, wrestling with uncertainty, hundreds of miles away. Engines roared to life. Bikers revved their motorcycles, strapped on helmets, and hit the road, united by a shared purpose. They weren't coming just for Sarah. They were coming for everyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of injustice. Their message was simple yet powerful. Doing the right thing matters, and they wouldn't let anyone forget it. By morning, the rumble of engines would echo through the streets of the sleepy little town, waking residents from their slumber and drawing curious crowds to their windows. The sight of 500 bikers rolling in together would leave jaws dropping and hearts swelling with pride. Sarah's story had become more than just hers. It had become a symbol of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between people willing to stand up for one another. The next morning dawned bright and crisp, the kind of day that usually promised peace and calm in the small town. But as Sarah stepped outside her modest home to take out the trash, she noticed something unusual. The distant hum of engines grew louder, echoing off the hills and filling the air with a steady, rhythmic roar. At first, she thought it might be a few bikers passing through, as they often did on weekends. But the sound didn't fade. It intensified, growing into a thunderous symphony of revving motors. Curiosity tugged at her, and she walked to the edge of her driveway, peering down the road. What she saw made her gasp. A long line of motorcycles stretched as far as the eye could see, their riders clad in leather jackets and bandanas, patches glinting in the sunlight. They weren't just passing through, they were heading straight toward Joe's diner. Sarah's heart raced as realization dawned. This had to be connected to what happened yesterday. She felt a mix of awe, gratitude, and nervousness bubbling inside her. Who were these people? And why were they here? Back at the diner, Joe was already feeling the weight of the morning. He'd arrived early to prep for the day, hoping to put yesterday's drama behind him. But when he pulled into the parking lot, his jaw dropped. Dozens of motorcycles were parked neatly along the curb, and more kept arriving by the minute. The sight was surreal, like something out of a movie. Customers who had come for breakfast stood frozen, staring at the spectacle unfolding before them. Some snapped photos with their phones, while others whispered excitedly to one another. Grizz was among the first to arrive, riding his beloved Harley-Davidson with pride. As he dismounted, he scanned the crowd, searching for Sarah. When he spotted her standing near the entrance, her expression a mixture of disbelief and wonder. He gave her a reassuring nod. "We've got your back," he said simply, his voice firm but kind. Sarah nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. She wanted to thank him, to express how much this meant to her, but words failed her. Instead, she offered a small, grateful smile. The bikers poured in. They wasted no time making their presence known. They filled every available seat in the diner, ordering pancakes, burgers, coffee, and pie. The kitchen staff scrambled to keep up with the influx of orders, while servers hustled back and forth, balancing trays laden with food. Despite the chaos, there was an undeniable sense of camaraderie in the air. These strangers weren't just customers, they were allies, united by a shared mission. Joe watched the scene unfold with a mixture of emotions. On one hand, he was overwhelmed by the sheer number of people flooding his establishment. On the other hand, he couldn't deny the boost in business. Tips flowed freely, and many bikers insisted on paying extra to show their appreciation for the hard-working staff. Yet beneath the surface, Joe knew this wasn't just about enjoying a meal. It was a statement, a powerful message that wouldn't be ignored. Eventually, Grizz approached Joe, flanked by a few fellow bikers. Their faces were serious, their body language commanding respect. Joe wiped his hands on a towel and braced himself for the conversation. "Joe," Grizz began, his tone measured but firm, "we're here because of Sarah. What happened to her wasn't right, and you know it." Joe opened his mouth to respond, but Grizz held up a hand, cutting him off. "Before you say anything, hear us out. We're not here to cause trouble or shut you down. We're here to remind you, and everyone else, that doing the right thing shouldn't come with consequences." The weight of Grizz's words hung heavy in the air. Joe shifted, uncomfortably, glancing around at the sea of leather-clad patrons filling his diner. He knew Grizz was right. Firing Sarah had been a decision born out of fear and pressure, not fairness. Seeing the overwhelming support she had received only reinforced how wrong he had been. Still, admitting fault wasn't easy, especially in front of so many people. "I messed up," Joe admitted finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I let fear get the better of me, and I made a choice I regret." Sarah didn't deserve to lose her job over this. Grizz nodded approvingly, sensing the sincerity in Joe's apology. "Then fix it," he urged. "Give her another chance. Show her and everyone here that you stand with those who do the right thing." With that, Grizz turned and motioned for Sarah to join them. She hesitated at first, unsure of what to expect, but eventually made her way over. Her cheeks flushed, with embarrassment as all eyes turned to her, but she held her head high. Joe took a deep breath and addressed her directly. "Sarah, I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "You were brave, and I punished you for it. That wasn't fair. Please come back to work. You're part of this family, and we need you." For a moment, silence fell over the diner. Then applause erupted loud and heartfelt. Customers clapped and cheered, some even whistling in approval. Sarah blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice trembling. "This means more to me than I can put into words." But the bikers weren't done yet. They had planned something special to ensure Sarah's story reached as many people as possible. One of the riders stepped forward holding a large cardboard sign that read, "Stand up for what's right." Others followed suit, holding similar signs with messages like, "Respect isn't optional and we support our community." Together they formed a human chain outside the diner, drawing curious onlookers from all over town. Local news crews, alerted by social media posts about the gathering, arrived shortly after. Reporters interviewed bikers, townsfolk, and even Sarah herself, capturing the essence of the event. Cameras flashed as journalists documented the sea of motorcycles lining the streets, the cheering crowds, and the emotional moments shared between strangers turned friends. By noon, images and videos of the demonstration had gone viral, spreading far beyond the borders of the small town. For Sarah, the day felt surreal. Just hours ago, she had been sitting alone in her living room wondering how she would make ends meet. Now she was surrounded by hundreds of people who had traveled miles to show their support. Strangers hugged her, thanked her, and told her she inspired them to stand up for what they believed in. Children handed her handmade cards decorated with rainbows and hearts, while elderly residents shared stories of times they too had faced injustice. By late afternoon, the energy remained electric. Bikers lingered, chatting with locals and sharing laughter over cups of coffee. Many promised to return for future visits, ensuring the diner stayed busy for weeks to come. Joe, visibly moved by the day's events, announced plans to host a Biker Appreciation Day once a month, offering discounts and specials to riders who continued to support the community. As the sun began to set, casting golden hues across the horizon, the bikers prepared to leave. One by one, they mounted their motorcycles, revving their engines in unison as a final salute to Sarah and the town. The sound was deafening, yet strangely beautiful, a reminder of the power of unity and the strength found in standing together. When the last motorcycle disappeared down the road, Sarah stood outside the diner watching the empty parking lot with a mix of emotions. Exhaustion, gratitude, and hope swirled within her. She realized that this experience had changed her, not just personally, but also in how she viewed the world. It reminded her that kindness, courage, and solidarity could move mountains, even in the face of adversity. And though the day was over, its impact would linger long after the engines fell silent. For Sarah, for the town, and for everyone who had witnessed the extraordinary display of support, this was more than just a story. It was a lesson in humanity, resilience, and the enduring power of doing the right thing. The days following the massive biker rally were unlike anything the small town had ever experienced. The buzz of excitement lingered in the air, as if the entire community was still processing what had happened. Conversations at the grocery store, the post office, and even on street corners revolved around Sarah, the bikers, and the powerful message they had sent. For many residents, it wasn't just about one woman standing up for an elderly biker. It was a reminder of the values that held their tight-knit community together: respect, kindness, and courage. Sarah herself found it hard to adjust to the sudden attention. She had always been a private person, content with living her life quietly while focusing on raising her daughter Emma. But now, she couldn't walk down the street without someone stopping her to shake her hand or offer words of encouragement. Local businesses started offering her discounts, and strangers would often drop by the diner just to tell her how much they admired her bravery. At first, the spotlight made her uncomfortable, but over time, she began to embrace it. Not for herself, but because she realized her story had inspired others to stand up for what was right. Joe's Diner became the epicenter of this newfound energy. Word of the event had spread far beyond the town, drawing visitors from neighboring areas who wanted to see the place where hundreds of bikers had gathered to support a waitress. Families came with their children, curious to learn about the story firsthand. Tourists stopped by during road trips, eager to snap photos of the iconic red and white checkered floors and vintage jukebox. Even regular patrons noticed a shift in the atmosphere. It felt warmer, livelier, almost electric. Joe, too, had undergone a transformation. The guilt he'd carried after firing Sarah had weighed heavily on him, but the overwhelming show of solidarity from the bikers forced him to confront his mistakes head-on. He didn't just apologize to Sarah publicly. He took steps to ensure such a situation wouldn't happen again. Joe implemented new policies aimed at protecting employees from unfair treatment, including a clause that allowed staff to defend themselves or others without fear of retaliation. He also created a community hero board inside the diner, where customers could nominate individuals who went above and beyond to help others. Unsurprisingly, Sarah's name was the first to appear. Grizz played a key role in keeping the momentum alive. After the rally, he stayed in touch with the network of bikers who had participated, organizing monthly meetings to discuss ways they could continue supporting causes close to their hearts. Together, they decided to form an informal alliance called the Riders for Justice, dedicated to helping those who faced injustice or hardship. Their motto? One ride, one cause. From fundraising for local charities to volunteering at food banks, the group quickly earned a reputation for being more than just motorcycle enthusiasts. They were a force for good. Their efforts weren't limited to grand gestures either. On quieter weekends, smaller groups of bikers would visit the diner, ensuring that business remained steady. They'd bring friends and family along, turning meals into lively gatherings filled with laughter and camaraderie. Over time, these visits fostered a unique bond between the bikers and the townspeople. What had once been a relationship built on mutual respect grew into something deeper, a genuine friendship rooted in shared experiences and common goals. For Sarah, life took on a new rhythm. With her job back and with a raise courtesy of Joe, she threw herself into her work with renewed passion. But her influence extended beyond the diner. Inspired by the outpouring of support she'd received, she began volunteering at a local youth center, mentoring teenagers and teaching them about accountability and empathy. Many of the kids reminded her of the bullies who had targeted Grizz, and she saw an opportunity to guide them toward better choices. Her approach was simple yet effective: lead by example. By sharing her own story, she showed them that standing up for others wasn't just noble, it was necessary. Emma, Sarah's young daughter, also benefited from the changes in their lives. Before the incident, Sarah had often worried about providing for her child, fearing that financial instability might limit Emma's opportunities. But now, with steady income and a supportive community, she felt hopeful about the future. Emma, meanwhile, basked in the glow of her mother's newfound fame. At school, classmates crowded around her during recess, asking questions about the bikers and whether she'd ridden on a motorcycle. She hadn't, but secretly dreamed of doing so someday. Though shy at first, Emma soon embraced the attention, proudly telling everyone that her mom was a hero. As weeks turned into months, the ripple effects of that fateful day continued to unfold. The diner thrived, thanks in large part to the influx of new customers eager to meet Sarah and hear her story. Joe invested in renovations, adding outdoor seating and expanding the menu to accommodate the growing crowd. He even hosted themed nights, featuring live music and special appearances by members of the Writers for Justice. These events drew huge crowds, further solidifying the diner's status as a beloved landmark. Meanwhile, the media coverage sparked conversations nationwide. Articles and interviews highlighted not only Sarah's bravery, but also the extraordinary response from the biker community. Social media posts praising the Writers for Justice went viral, inspiring similar acts of solidarity in other towns. People began reaching out to Grizz and his team, asking for advice on how to organize similar demonstrations in their own communities. In response, the group launched a website, providing resources and guidance for anyone interested in joining or starting their own movements. Back in the small town, life slowly returned to its usual pace, but with noticeable differences. Neighbors greeted each other more warmly, shopkeepers went out of their way to assist customers, and random acts of kindness became increasingly common. It was as though the bikers' arrival had awakened something dormant within the community, reminding everyone of the importance of looking out for one another. Even the teens involved in the original confrontation underwent a transformation. Initially defensive and dismissive of the backlash, they eventually faced consequences for their actions. Some were required to attend counseling sessions focused on conflict resolution and empathy, while others performed community service at local shelters and senior centers. To their credit, they seemed genuinely remorseful, apologizing both privately and publicly for their behavior. Grizz, ever the forgiving soul, accepted their apology, encouraging them to channel their energy into positive pursuits instead. Autumn approached, bringing cooler temperatures and vibrant foliage. The town prepared for its annual harvest festival. This year, however, there was a special addition to the lineup, a charity ride organized by the Writers for Justice. Dozens of participants signed up, eager to contribute to the cause. Proceeds from the event went toward building a new playground, in memory of Sarah's late husband, whose passing had left a void in her life years earlier. Standing beside Grizz as they unveiled the plaque dedicating the playground, Sarah felt a profound sense of closure and gratitude. Looking back, Sarah marveled at how one moment of courage had set off a chain reaction that touched countless lives. What had started as a quiet afternoon at the diner had blossomed into something extraordinary, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness could spark monumental change. And though she never sought recognition or reward, she found solace in knowing that her decision to stand up for Grizz had resonated far beyond the confines of her little town. In the end, it wasn't just about Sarah, Grizz, or the bikers. It was about the collective power of humanity. It was about ordinary people coming together to champion justice, compassion, and unity. And as long as stories like hers continued to be told, the spirit of that unforgettable day would live on, inspiring generations to come. The months that followed the biker rally brought a wave of change to the small town, transforming it in ways no one could have predicted. What began as a single act of bravery by Sarah had grown into a movement, a testament to the power of standing up for what's right and the incredible impact of unity. The ripple effects of that day continued to spread, touching lives far beyond the diner and its patrons. One of the most remarkable changes was how the community itself evolved. People who had once kept to themselves now made an effort to connect with their neighbors. Conversations at the grocery store weren't just about sales or recipes, they were about kindness, respect, and looking out for one another. Even long-time grudges seemed to fade as people realized how fleeting life could be, and how much more fulfilling it was to focus on positivity rather than negativity. The town felt lighter, brighter, almost reborn. Joe's Diner remained at the heart of this transformation. It wasn't just a place to grab a meal anymore, it was a symbol of resilience and hope. The diner attracted visitors from neighboring towns and even other states, all eager to see where hundreds of bikers had gathered to support a waitress who had stood her ground. Tourists would sit in the same booth where Grizz had sipped his coffee, imagining the moment when Sarah stepped outside to confront the bullies. Some even took photos of the parking lot, marveling at the idea of 500 motorcycles lining the street. Joe embraced the newfound attention with open arms. He worked tirelessly to ensure the diner lived up to its growing reputation, not just as a restaurant, but as a beacon of community spirit. The Community Hero Board he'd installed quickly became a focal point. Every week, someone new was nominated. Teachers, nurses, firefighters, and everyday citizens whose actions inspired others. Each honoree received a framed certificate and a free meal at the diner, which often turned into lively celebrations attended by friends, family, and well-wishers. For Sarah, life took on a new rhythm. With her job back and financial stability restored, she threw herself into her work and volunteer efforts with renewed energy. Her role at the youth center became particularly meaningful. Many of the teenagers she mentored came from troubled backgrounds, struggling with peer pressure and self-doubt. Sarah used her own story to teach them valuable lessons about accountability, empathy, and courage. She didn't preach or lecture. Instead, she shared her experiences honestly, showing them that doing the right thing wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. Emma, Sarah's daughter, blossomed under the influence of her mother's newfound confidence. Once shy and reserved, Emma began participating more actively in school activities. She joined the debate club, surprising everyone with her eloquence and passion for social justice. When asked about her inspiration, Emma proudly credited her mom. "She showed me that standing up for others makes you stronger," she told her classmates during a presentation. Her words resonated deeply, earning applause from teachers and students alike. Meanwhile, Grizz and the Riders for Justice continued to make waves. Their monthly meetings grew larger as more bikers joined the cause, drawn by the group's mission to support those in need. They organized charity rides, fundraisers, and awareness campaigns, tackling issues ranging from homelessness to education reform. One of their biggest successes came when they partnered with local businesses to build affordable housing for low-income families. The project not only provided shelter, but also created jobs, further strengthening the town's economy. The media. Coverage of the Riders for Justice inspired similar movements across the country. Townsfolk were amazed to learn that their small community had sparked something so profound. Reporters frequently visited to document the ongoing impact, interviewing residents and capturing footage of events like the Harvest Festival charity ride. Social media buzzed with hashtags like Stand Up for What's Right and Riders for Justice, uniting people from different walks of life under a shared vision of compassion and solidarity. Even the teens involved in the original confrontation underwent significant growth. Facing consequences for their actions forced them to reflect on their behavior and consider the harm they had caused. Counseling sessions helped them develop better coping mechanisms, while community service gave them a sense of purpose. By working alongside seniors at the local nursing home or helping clean up parks, they discovered the joy of contributing positively to society. Eventually, several of them approached Sarah personally to apologize again, expressing genuine remorse and gratitude for the second chance they'd been given. As winter approached, bringing frosty mornings and cozy evenings by the fire, the town prepared for its annual holiday parade. This year, however, there was a special edition, a float dedicated to Sarah and the Riders for Justice. Decorated with twinkling lights and banners bearing messages of hope and unity, the float featured Sarah riding sidecar style in Grizz's Harley-Davidson. As they passed through the streets, waving to cheering crowds, tears streamed down Sarah's face. She hadn't expected such recognition, yet she couldn't deny how much it meant to her. Grizz, ever humble despite his growing fame, reminded everyone that the real heroes were the ones who stood up every day, not just in dramatic moments, but in quiet, consistent ways. His words resonated deeply, reinforcing the idea that true strength lay in compassion and action. Together, he and Sarah represented everything the town cherished: resilience, kindness, and unwavering determination to do what was right. By spring, the playground built in memory of Sarah's late husband had become a beloved fixture in the UI community. Children laughed and played beneath the watchful eyes of parents, many of whom recalled the emotional dedication ceremony. The plaque honoring Sarah's husband read simply, "In loving memory of a man who believed in making the world a better place." For Sarah, visiting the playground brought both sadness and comfort. While she missed him dearly, she found solace in knowing his legacy lived on through the happiness of others. Throughout it all, Sarah never lost sight of why she had acted that fateful day. She hadn't sought fame or reward. She had simply followed her instincts, driven by a desire to protect someone vulnerable. Yet the overwhelming response from the bikers and the community taught her something invaluable: that standing up for others wasn't just an individual act, it was a collective responsibility. By defending Grizz, she had ignited a chain reaction of kindness and courage that transcended her wildest dreams. Life in the small town wasn't perfect. Challenges still arose, disagreements still flared, but there was a palpable shift in how people approached them. Conversations focused less on blame and more on solutions. Strangers offered help without hesitation, whether it was carrying groceries for an elderly neighbor or shoveling snow off driveways after a storm. Acts of kindness, big and small, became part of the fabric of daily life. Looking ahead, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the opportunities she'd been given, but for the reminder that humanity's greatest strength lay in its ability to come together. Whether it was 500 bikers arriving in solidarity or a single person choosing to speak up, the message was clear: we are stronger when we stand united. And though her journey had been anything but ordinary, Sarah knew, one thing for certain, that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can spark the greatest revolutions. As the years passed, the small town continued to thrive, its spirit forever changed by the events that had unfolded. The story of Sarah and the bikers became a cornerstone of local lore, a tale told and retold at gatherings, festivals, and even school assemblies. It wasn't just a story about bravery or justice, it was a reminder of the power of community, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the incredible things that could happen when people came together with a shared purpose. Sarah's life took on new dimensions as she embraced her role as an accidental hero. While she never sought fame, she couldn't deny the profound impact her actions had on others. Her days were filled with meaningful work, both at Joe's Diner and through her volunteer efforts at the youth center. She mentored countless teenagers, helping them navigate challenges and encouraging them to find their own voices. Many of these young people went on to achieve great things. Some became teachers, others pursued careers in social work or advocacy. But they all credited Sarah with planting the seeds of confidence and compassion within them. Emma, now a teenager, herself grew into a remarkable young woman who carried her mother's values in everything she did. Inspired by Sarah's courage, Emma became a leader among her peers, organizing fundraisers for local charities and speaking out against bullying in her school. Her passion for justice earned her recognition beyond the town, including scholarships to prestigious universities. When asked about her inspiration, Emma always pointed to her mom. "She taught me that kindness isn't passive," Emma would say during interviews. "It's something you fight for every single day." Joe's Diner remained a beloved institution, not just because of its delicious food, but because of the warmth and inclusivity it represented. Under Joe's leadership, the diner evolved into more than just a place to eat. It became a hub for connection and celebration. Families gathered there for birthdays, couples celebrated anniversaries, and travelers stopped by to soak in the charm of a community rooted in kindness. The Community Hero Board continued to honor individuals whose actions inspired others, ensuring that the spirit of gratitude and recognition lived on. Grizz, meanwhile, remained a steadfast presence in Sarah's life and in the broader community. Though he occasionally hit the open road for long rides, he always returned to the town that had become his second home. His leadership of the Riders for Justice cemented his legacy as a force for good. The group expanded its reach, tackling issues like environmental conservation, veterans support, and disaster relief. Their annual charity rides drew participants from across the country, raising funds and awareness for causes close to their hearts. Each event reinforced the idea that motorcycles weren't just vehicles. They were symbols of freedom, unity, and resilience. The playground built in memory of Sarah's late husband stood as a testament to love and legacy. Children played happily, under the watchful eyes of parents, while benches nearby provided a peaceful spot for reflection. For Sarah, visiting the playground brought waves of emotion: joy for the laughter it inspired, sorrow for the husband she missed dearly, and pride for the way his memory continued to bring people together. On quiet afternoons, she would sit on one of the benches watching Emma play with friends and feel a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that her family's story had touched so many lives. The teens involved in the original confrontation also found redemption in unexpected ways. Over time, they transformed into advocates for change themselves, using their experiences to mentor younger generations. One of them, Jake, became a counselor at the youth center where Sarah volunteered, focusing on conflict resolution and emotional intelligence. Another, Mia, started a peer support group at the high school, creating a safe space for students to discuss challenges without judgment. Their journey from troublemakers to role models served as proof that everyone deserved a second chance, and that growth was possible with guidance and determination. The ripple effects of Sarah's act of courage extended far beyond the borders of the small town. News outlets revisited the story periodically, highlighting how the community had grown stronger and more united over time. Social media campaigns inspired by the Writers for Justice gained traction worldwide, encouraging people to take action in their own communities. From organizing neighborhood cleanups to advocating for policy changes, individuals embraced the message that standing up for what's right didn't require grand gestures. It simply required heart. Back in the town, annual traditions kept the spirit of solidarity alive. The Harvest Festival charity ride became a highlight of the year, drawing hundreds of participants and spectators. Local businesses collaborated to host themed weekends, celebrating everything from music to art to history. The holiday parade featured floats honoring heroes past and present, reminding everyone that courage came in many forms. And every spring the town gathered at the playground for a special ceremony, reflecting on the progress made and looking ahead to future opportunities for growth. For Sarah, life felt full, not perfect, but rich with purpose and connection. She often thought about the chain of events set into motion by her decision to step outside that afternoon. If she hadn't defended Grizz, none of this might have happened. The friendships forged, the lives transformed, the lessons learned. Yet she knew that the real magic lay not in any one moment, but in the collective effort of an entire community, rising to support one another. One summer evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sarah sat on her porch with Emma and Grizz. They sipped lemonade and laughed about old memories, marveling at how far they'd come since that fateful day. "You know," Grizz said thoughtfully, "sometimes I think we underestimate the power of doing the right thing. We tell ourselves it won't matter, or that no one will notice. But then something like this happens and you realize it matters more than anything." Sarah nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And it's not just about us," she added softly. "It's about everyone who stood with us, the bikers, the townspeople, the kids who decided to change. It's about proving that kindness can be louder than cruelty, that unity can overcome division." As night fell and fireflies danced in the yard, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace. Her journey had been unpredictable, filled with challenges and triumphs alike. But through it all, she had discovered something invaluable: that even the smallest acts of courage could spark monumental change. And as long as stories like hers continued to inspire others, the spirit of hope, resilience, and humanity would endure, lighting the way for generations to come.